an Indian soldier at Tanga wrote 4 words in his diary the night before the landing. "We are not ready." No one in London read them. By the next afternoon, 8,000 of the Empire's men were running from a garrison of 1,000, and the thing that finally broke them was bees. Not artillery, not machine guns, bees. This is the War Diary, and this is the story of the battle the British Empire buried so deep. It took a century for anyone to ask what actually happened to the men it left on that beach. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how 8,000 men lost to 1,000, and exactly why the Empire made sure you never heard about it. It starts 3 months earlier, with a plan drawn up in a room in London that never once asked what these men actually needed. World War I is 3 months old. Britain has already thrown its regular army into the trenches of France, which means when it wants German East Africa's only working port erased from the map, it doesn't send regulars. It sends India, 8,000 men of the Indian Expeditionary Force B, and here is the part the history books glide straight past. Most of these battalions were not hardened soldiers. They were raw. Recruited in a hurry, shipped across the Indian Ocean, handed rifles some of them had never fired in anger, then told to pull off an amphibious assault on a fortified port, one of the hardest operations in all of war. No time to train, no artillery landed alongside them. The 27th Bangalore Brigade, the very unit that would collapse first, had never seen this beach, barely knew their own officers, and were carrying weapons they didn't know how to use. Britain knew all of this. The Empire was impatient, and the Empire did not wait. The second mistake is almost funny, if it weren't so costly. On the 2nd of November, the British cruiser HMS Fox sails into Tanga harbor. Its captain goes ashore and hands the town an ultimatum, 1 hour to surrender. Then, before he leaves, he asks one question that seals everything. Is the harbor mined? The Germans say yes, it's a lie, but the captain believes them. Think about what that question just did. You don't ask a town if its harbor is mined unless you're about to sail an invasion fleet into it. Britain had just announced its own attack and handed the Germans a warning they'd never otherwise have had. The hour passes, the flag stays up, and while the British sweep for mines that don't exist, a German colonel is already racing toward Tanga by rail with every soldier he can find. His name, Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck. Lettow-Vorbeck wasn't a desk officer. He'd go on to fight a guerrilla war for 4 straight years against the entire British Empire. Outnumbered, undersupplied, cut off, and never lose a battle. The only German general never defeated in the First World War. He looked at Tanga's defense, 1 company of Askari troops, maybe 250 men, and did the one thing the British never expected. He reinforced. By rail from the foot of Kilimanjaro, company after company, until he had roughly 1,000 men with perfect knowledge of the ground. 1,000 against 8,000? The landing was almost too easy. The beach was undefended because the mines never existed. The men waded ashore, formed up, and nothing happened. And in that silence, the British started to believe it. Maybe the Empire's weight would just roll over this colonial garrison. By the 3rd of November, the force was ashore. By noon on the 4th, the order came, march on the city. For a moment, it worked. The Kashmir Rifles and the Lancashire Regiment pushed into the town, took the customs house, took the Hotel Deutscher Kaiser, raised the Union Jack over Tanga. Then it stopped, because that's when Lettow-Vorbeck's hidden men opened fire. The advance dissolved into skirmishing through the coconut and palm oil plantations. The southern contingent was cut to pieces, and the raw Indian battalions, the men who were never trained, never ready, began to break. The 63rd Palamcotta Light Infantry turned and ran. When the 13th Rajputs saw them running, their nerve went with them. Now watch what happens next, because this is the moment that decides everything. And it's not what any general planned. As the 98th Infantry pushed through the plantations, someone, a stray bullet, a stumble, no one will ever know, disturbed a hive. Then another. The air filled. Thousands of bees. And they didn't care whose side you were on. This is it. The moment from the opening. Not artillery, not machine guns. Bees. The 98th broke and scattered. The bees hit the Germans too. That's why it's remembered as the Battle of the Bees. But it was the British line that shattered. And here's the part history loves to leave out. After the war, British propaganda turned those bees into a German plot. Tripwired hives rigged to agitate the swarm, as if the enemy had weaponized an entire insect population. A story that let Britain blame a swarm of bees instead of the decision to send 8,000 untrained men into a fight they were never ready for. Leto Vorbeck saw the cracks and pushed everything through them. His last reserves, a bayonet charge, and the men who should have held did not hold. They broke. The retreat to the beach became a stampede. General Aitken ordered a full withdrawal. The army that sailed to erase a German colony limped back onto its ships and left behind everything: rifles, machine guns, ammunition, medical stores, tents, enough to arm an entire army. Leto Vorbeck's men, who'd fought with outdated weapons, now held thousands of brand new British rifles they'd use for years to come. The Empire hadn't just lost the battle, it had rearmed its enemy. The numbers: roughly 1,000 British and Indian soldiers killed or wounded. The German defenders lost around 150. 8,000 had come for 1,000, and it was the 1,000 who held. Then the Empire did what empires do. It buried it. The defeat was so humiliating that records were quietly sealed, dispatches softened, and the name Tanga barely whispered in the histories written after. But the men who were erased weren't the generals who blundered. They were the soldiers of Expeditionary Force B, recruited in a hurry, shipped across an ocean, handed rifles they barely knew, and sent into a fight no one had prepared them for. They were blamed for the rout. The word spread that the Indian units had failed, but the real failure happened long before the first shot. In London, where the plan was drawn in the decision to send raw men into the hardest operation in war, the Empire made the mistake. The soldiers paid for it, and history erased them both. That's the story Britain didn't want told, and that's exactly the story the War Diary was built to tell. This is what we do here. We dig up the battles the Empire buried and the men it chose to forget. If you want the stories history tried to erase, subscribe. And if this one made you angry, good. That's the point.